Welcome everyone to a brand new episode here in the Easy English Room. It's genuinely a pleasure to have you with us today, and we're really glad you've decided to spend a bit of your time listening in. I'm your host, Henry, just a regular guy from London who's always trying to find a bit of sunshine, even when the London clouds are looking particularly grey and the weather feels like it hasn't smiled in days. I suppose that's quite fitting for today's topic, actually.
And I'm Emma, also coming to you from a rather drizzly London today. No surprises there. We're truly so glad you've tuned in wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Whether you're on the tube, maybe squeezed between people during rush hour, walking the dog in Hyde Park with a bit of fresh air, or just relaxing at home with a warm cup of tea, we've got a topic that I think is really going to resonate with you on a personal level. Today, we're diving into the power and the practice of positive thinking, and how it can quietly but powerfully shape your everyday life.
Now, to be completely honest, and I think some of our listeners might relate to this, when I first heard that phrase, positive thinking, I used to roll my eyes a bit. You hear it everywhere these days, don't you? It's on social media, in books, in podcasts, people constantly saying, just be positive. And after a while, it can start to sound a bit unrealistic or even a bit annoying. But Emma, let me ask you this. Is it really just about wearing a permanent grin even when things are going completely wrong?
That's such a good question, and honestly, it's one of the biggest misunderstandings about positive thinking. Many people assume it means ignoring problems or pretending everything is perfect, like living in some kind of fairy tale. But that's not what it is at all. Positive thinking is actually about how you respond to the challenges in your life. It's about your mindset, how you choose to interpret situations. It's about training your brain over time to notice the good things that still exist, even when things feel overwhelming or stressful.
So it's not about denying reality, but more about choosing how to face it.
Exactly. You're not pretending problems don't exist, you're just deciding not to let them completely control your thoughts. It's about balance. You acknowledge the difficulty, but you also look for what you can do next, or what lesson you can take from it.
In a way, it's like having a sort of mental filter, isn't it? Like you're adjusting the lens through which you see the world.
Spot on, Henry. That's a perfect way to describe it. It's like choosing to focus your attention more on possibilities rather than just obstacles. You're still realistic, you're still grounded, but you're not letting negativity take over your entire mindset. It's not about living in a fantasy world where everything is perfect. It's about being solution-focused instead of problem-obsessed.
That really helps clarify things. I think a lot of people assume it's about ignoring problems, but it's actually more practical than that. Let's try to bring this down to a real-life example for our listeners, something they might experience in their daily routine. Imagine this. You're stuck on a bus in central London, right in the middle of a massive traffic jam. Cars everywhere, barely moving. You're already 10 minutes late for an important meeting, maybe even a job interview. Naturally, your first thought might be something like, "That's it, my whole day's ruined. I'm going to mess this up and look completely unprofessional."
Yes, and that reaction is very natural. Most people would feel stressed, frustrated, maybe even a bit panicked. But here's where positive thinking makes a difference. A positive thinker would still recognize that the situation is far from ideal. The traffic is frustrating and being late isn't great. But instead of letting their thoughts spiral into worst-case scenarios, they might pause and think, all right, I can't change the traffic, but I can control what I do next. So maybe they use that time to review their notes, mentally prepare, or even send a quick message to explain the delay.
So instead of losing control emotionally, they stay focused on what they can control.
Exactly. It's a shift from helplessness to action, and even that small shift can reduce stress significantly. They might also remind themselves, I'll do my best when I get there, even if I'm a bit late. That mindset helps them arrive calmer, more prepared, and more confident.
It really is a complete shift in perspective, isn't it? The situation hasn't changed, the traffic is still there, but the experience feels very different depending on your thoughts. And you know, what's interesting is that this isn't just motivational talk or something you hear from lifestyle coaches. There's actual science backing this up. Research from well-known institutions like the Mayo Clinic has shown that positive thinking can help people manage stress more effectively.
That's right, and it goes even further than just stress. Studies suggest that people who practice positive thinking regularly tend to have better overall health, stronger immune systems, and even a longer lifespan. It affects how your body responds to challenges, not just your mind. Over time, it can improve your quality of life in very real, measurable ways.
That's quite powerful when you think about it. Something as simple as changing your thought patterns can have such a deep impact on your life. It really shows how much our thoughts can shape our reality. But I imagine some listeners might be thinking, this sounds great, but where do I even start? Because changing your mindset isn't always easy.
That's completely understandable. In fact, I think most people feel exactly the same way when they first start thinking about changing their mindset. It can feel overwhelming, like you have to fix everything at once. But the key here is to start small, very small, almost so small that it feels easy and manageable. You don't have to completely transform your thinking overnight, and honestly, you shouldn't try to. Real, lasting change usually happens gradually, step by step. One of the simplest and most effective ways to begin is by paying attention to your inner dialogue, the way you talk to yourself throughout the day, especially in those quiet moments when no one else is listening.
That little voice in your head that's always commenting on things, the one that kind of narrates your day without you even noticing it most of the time?
Exactly, that's the one. We all have it, and it's constantly running in the background, shaping how we see ourselves and the world around us. The interesting thing is that sometimes it can be quite critical, even harsh, without us even realizing it. It becomes so normal that we stop questioning it. For example, if you catch yourself thinking something like, I always make mistakes, or I'm so clumsy, or even I'm not good enough, that's a negative pattern at work. The first step isn't to fix it immediately, it's simply noticing it. Just becoming aware that this is how you're speaking to yourself. Don't judge yourself for having those thoughts because everyone does at some point. Just observe them, almost like you're listening from the outside. Then, once you've noticed the thought, gently challenge it and try to reframe it into something more balanced and supportive.
So instead of saying something harsh like, I always mess things up, you might pause for a second and say, what exactly? How would you change it in a practical way?
You might say something like, I made a mistake this time, but I can learn from it. Or I'm improving even if I'm not perfect yet. Or even, this didn't go the way I wanted, but that doesn't define me. The idea isn't to swing to the other extreme and pretend everything is great when it's not. It's not about lying to yourself or ignoring reality. It's about being fair and balanced in how you evaluate yourself. You're acknowledging the mistake, but you're also giving yourself space to grow from it instead of tearing yourself down.
That actually sounds much more realistic and achievable than just forcing yourself to be positive all the time. Because honestly, that always felt a bit unnatural to me, like you're just pretending everything is great when it clearly isn't.
Exactly, and that's a really important point. Positive thinking isn't about pretending or ignoring difficulties. It's not about perfection at all. It's about progress. It's about gradually building a healthier, more supportive relationship with your own thoughts over time. Think of it as training your mind, the same way you would train your body. At first, it might feel unfamiliar or even a bit awkward, but the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And over time, those small, consistent changes start to add up, leading to a much bigger shift in how you experience your life on a daily basis.
So it's almost like instead of immediately criticizing yourself, you pause and say something like, everyone makes mistakes sometimes, and I'm actually learning something valuable from this one, even if it doesn't feel great in the moment. It's more like giving yourself a bit of understanding, maybe even a bit of patience instead of jumping straight to criticism.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Well, maybe not word for word exactly like that every time, but you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. It's really about shifting your tone from harsh and critical to supportive and constructive. That small shift in how you speak to yourself, just that tiny adjustment, can have a surprisingly powerful impact on your confidence and overall mindset. At first, it might seem like a small change, almost insignificant, but over time, those little changes build up. And as they do, you start to feel more capable, more resilient, and much less afraid of making mistakes because you know you won't attack yourself for them.
Interestingly, it's not just your mood or your confidence that improves when you start thinking this way. There's actually a physical side to it as well, which I find fascinating. Positive thinking is almost like a hidden superpower when it comes to your physical health. When you're stuck in a loop of negative thoughts, constantly worrying, criticizing yourself, or expecting the worst, your body reacts to that stress. It releases cortisol, which is known as the stress hormone. And when that happens repeatedly, it can really start to wear you down over time.
That's absolutely right, and it's something a lot of people don't realize. Our thoughts don't just stay in our heads, they have real physical effects on our bodies. Too much cortisol over a long period of time is really not good for your system. It can disrupt your sleep, leaving you feeling tired even after a full night in bed. It can drain your energy levels, making even simple tasks feel exhausting. It can also affect your overall health in ways that build up gradually. On the other hand, when you start thinking more positively, or even just more balanced and less negative, your stress levels begin to drop naturally. And as a result, a lot of good things start to happen. You tend to sleep better, you wake up feeling more rested, and your immune system gets a proper boost, which helps your body fight off illness more effectively.
It even goes as far as protecting your heart, which I found quite surprising when I first came across that idea. I remember reading about a study by the American Psychological Association that suggested people who generally have a more positive outlook on life are around 13% less likely to suffer from heart disease. When you think about it, that's actually a quite significant difference, especially over the long term.
It really is a massive statistic when you stop and think about what it means in real life. And what's even more interesting is that it doesn't stop there. People who practice positive thinking regularly also tend to have lower blood pressure and healthier cardiovascular systems overall. So it's not just about feeling good emotionally or having a better mood. It's about taking care of your body in a very real, scientific, and measurable way. When you combine the emotional benefits with the physical ones, it becomes clear that this is something worth paying attention to. If that's not a strong and convincing reason to start practicing positivity, even in small ways, starting today, I honestly don't know what is.
To be honest, the more you practice it, the more natural it starts to feel. In the beginning, it might feel a little strange, maybe even slightly uncomfortable because you're not used to speaking to yourself in that way. It can feel a bit forced, like you're trying something new and you're not quite sure if you're doing it right. But over time, with repetition and a bit of patience, it gradually becomes part of how you think. It starts to feel less like an effort and more like a habit. It's a bit like going to the gym. You don't expect to build strength in a single session. You go regularly, you stay consistent, and slowly your muscles grow stronger. The same idea applies here, but with your mind. You have to train that mental muscle regularly if you want to see real results. So, Emma, let's make this really practical and easy for our listeners to follow. Imagine someone sitting at home in London right now, maybe listening to us with a cup of tea, wondering where to begin. What's a simple, realistic first step they can take today without feeling overwhelmed?
That's a great question, and I love that you're focusing on making this practical. One of my absolute favorite tools, and one I always recommend, especially for beginners, is keeping a gratitude journal. Now, I know it might sound simple at first, and some people even think it sounds a bit too basic or not powerful enough to make a real difference. But the truth is, it's incredibly effective when you do it consistently over time. The idea is very straightforward. Every single day, you take just a minute or two, literally just a minute or two, to write down 3 things that you're genuinely thankful for. It doesn't take much time, and you don't need anything fancy, just a notebook or even a note on your phone.
Just 3 things? That actually sounds quite manageable even for someone who has a really busy schedule or a lot on their plate. It doesn't feel like a huge commitment, which probably makes it easier to stick to.
Exactly, and that's really the beauty of it. It's simple, it's realistic, and it's doable for almost anyone. And the most important thing to remember is that those 3 things don't have to be big, dramatic, or life-changing events. In fact, it's often better if they're small, everyday moments that you might normally overlook. For example, it could be something as simple as enjoying a nice, warm cup of tea in the morning, having a friendly and pleasant conversation with a colleague or a friend, finishing a task that you had been putting off for a while, or even just noticing that the sun came out for a few minutes after a cloudy day. These small moments matter more than we think. What you're really doing is training your brain to notice the good parts of your life, no matter how small or ordinary they might seem at first.
That really puts things into perspective. It's interesting how something so small can actually change the way you see your whole day. So, for example, if I'm having a bit of a rough day at work, maybe everything feels stressful, deadlines are piling up, and I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. Instead of just focusing on everything that's going wrong, I could pause for a moment, take a step back, grab a notebook, and write down a few simple things. Maybe I'd write that I'm grateful for my health, or the fact that I have a job, or even the opportunity to learn something new that day, even if it's challenging or uncomfortable in the moment.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. In a way, what you're doing in that moment is gently shifting your focus. You're moving your attention away from everything that feels like it's going wrong and bringing it back to what's still going right in your life. And that shift, even though it might seem small, can make a big difference in how you feel. When your mind starts to focus on those positive or stable aspects, your body responds as well. You begin to relax a little, your breathing might slow, and you feel slightly more grounded. It's like reminding yourself that not everything is falling apart, even if one part of your day feels difficult or overwhelming.
Another really important point you mentioned earlier was positive self-talk, and I think that connects very well with this idea. For example, if I'm feeling completely exhausted or overwhelmed, maybe after a long day or when I have too much to do, instead of telling myself something like, I can't handle this, or this is too much for me, I could pause and try saying something more supportive, like, I'm doing my best right now, and I can get through this moment step by step. Or I don't have to solve everything at once. I can take it one small step at a time.
Precisely. That's a perfect and very practical example. What's important to understand here is that your body is always responding to your thoughts, even when you're not fully aware of it. The way you speak to yourself sends signals to your brain about whether a situation is safe and manageable or threatening and overwhelming. When you use positive, supportive, and realistic language with yourself, it sends a calming signal to your brain. It tells your system, this is okay, we can handle this. And as a result, your stress levels begin to decrease. You might notice that you feel a bit calmer, a bit more in control, and less overwhelmed than before.
I completely agree with that, and I think it's something many people can relate to once they start paying attention. At the same time, I also think it's really important to talk about how to actually stop negative thoughts before they completely take over. Because if we're honest, and I think most of us can admit this, we can sometimes be our own worst critics. We say things to ourselves that we would never say to someone else.
Oh, absolutely. And that's such an important point to highlight. It's something almost everyone struggles with at some point in their lives, so no one is alone in this. The first step, as we mentioned earlier, is simply recognizing when those negative thoughts are happening. You have to catch them in the moment. For example, if you catch yourself thinking something like, I'll never be good at speaking English, instead of immediately accepting that thought as a fact, you pause for a moment, you take a step back mentally, and you ask yourself a simple but powerful question. Is this actually true, or is this just how I feel right now? That question alone can create a bit of distance between you and the thought.
And when you really stop and think about it, you often realize that it isn't true at all. It's usually just a reaction in the moment, often based on frustration, tiredness, or maybe even fear. It feels real at the time, but it doesn't mean it's accurate. And when we start replacing those negative thoughts with more balanced and realistic ones, we begin to see ourselves in a completely different way, one that's much more encouraging and supportive.
Exactly. And that shift is incredibly powerful. When you start being kinder and more understanding toward yourself in that way, your brain actually responds on a chemical level. It begins to produce more of those feel-good chemicals like dopamine and serotonin, which are linked to feelings of happiness, motivation, and well-being. At the same time, it reduces the production of stress hormones. So, in a way, it really is a win-win situation. You're not only improving how you feel mentally and emotionally, but you're also supporting your physical health at the same time.
Now, Emma, there's something I've been hearing more and more about lately, something called toxic positivity. It seems to be everywhere, especially on social media and in everyday conversations. It sounds like one of those ideas that could be helpful on the surface, but actually a bit of a trap if it's misunderstood or taken too far. What exactly does that mean, and why are people starting to talk about it more?
That's a really important point to bring up, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because it's something almost everyone confuses with healthy positivity. Toxic positivity is when people try to force a good vibes only attitude, no matter what the situation is, even in moments where it's completely unrealistic, unhelpful, or even harmful. It's the idea that you should always stay positive and never allow yourself to feel sadness, frustration, or disappointment. For example, if something genuinely difficult happens, like losing a job, struggling with something personal, or feeling overwhelmed, and you just say, it's fine, everything's perfect, while ignoring the problem completely, that's not healthy. In fact, it can make things worse because it means you're avoiding reality instead of dealing with it in a meaningful way.
I see, so it's not really about positivity at all in that case. It's more like pretending everything is okay when it clearly isn't, and maybe even pushing your real feelings aside instead of acknowledging them.
Exactly. That's a great way to describe it. Healthy positivity is very different, and that distinction really matters. Real, healthy positivity doesn't ignore problems or difficult emotions. It actually helps you face them with more strength and clarity.
It gives you the emotional energy to deal with challenges directly, rather than running away from them or pretending they don't exist. It's about saying, yes, this is difficult and I don't feel great about it, while also reminding yourself, but I can handle this and I will find a way forward. It's about acknowledging your feelings, whether they're positive or negative, and then choosing a constructive and realistic way to move forward from that place.
That balance seems really important, actually. It's not about being positive all the time, but about being honest with yourself while still trying to move forward in a healthy way. And speaking of moving forward, you mentioned earlier that positivity can also help with setting and achieving goals, which I found really interesting. I've heard about something called visualization. Is that connected to this idea of positive thinking?
It absolutely is, and it's a very powerful technique when used correctly. In fact, it's something that many top athletes, performers, and even successful professionals use regularly, especially before big events or important moments. The idea itself is quite simple, but the impact can be quite profound. You close your eyes, take a moment to relax, and then clearly imagine yourself achieving your goal in as much detail as possible. You don't just think about the end result, you try to feel it, see it, and experience it in your mind. For our listeners, for example, that could mean imagining yourself walking confidently through London, speaking English naturally, having smooth and relaxed conversations, and feeling comfortable expressing yourself without hesitation.
That actually sounds quite motivating, even just thinking about it now. It almost creates a sense of excitement, like you're getting a preview of what's possible. And there's real research behind this idea as well, isn't there? It's not just something people say, it actually has some scientific support.
Yes, absolutely. There is real research behind it. Studies discussed in sources like Psychology Today have shown that when you visualize yourself doing something, your brain begins to respond as if you're actually performing that action in real life. It activates similar neural pathways, which helps strengthen those mental connections. Over time, this can make the goal feel more familiar and more achievable. So it's not just about motivation or imagination, it actually prepares your brain for success by making the experience feel more real and less intimidating.
I think a lot of people nowadays refer to that idea as manifesting, especially younger generations. It seems to be a very popular concept these days in 2026, where people are really interested in mindset and personal growth.
That's true. It has definitely become more popular and more widely discussed in recent years. But at the same time, it's important to remember that it's not just about thinking or visualizing alone. Your environment also plays a huge role in shaping your mindset. The people you spend time with, the conversations you have, and even the content you consume can all influence how you think and feel. Being around supportive, encouraging people who believe in you can make a massive difference. It makes it much easier to stay positive, motivated, and focused on your goals, especially during difficult moments.
That makes a lot of sense, and I suppose it works both ways, doesn't it? It's not just about receiving positivity from others, we can also share that positivity with the people around us. Even something very small like giving a compliment, offering a few words of encouragement, or simply smiling at someone can have a surprisingly big impact on their day.
Absolutely. And that's one of the simplest yet most powerful things we can do. No one ever really gets tired of hearing something kind or positive. It's such a small action, but it can create a ripple effect. It can lift someone's mood, boost their confidence, and even change the way they approach their day. And interestingly, it doesn't just benefit the other person, it affects you as well. When you spread positivity, you often feel more positive yourself. It helps create a more supportive and uplifting environment for everyone involved.
So, Emma, let's end with an important and very practical question. How do we stay positive when things genuinely go wrong? Because if we're being realistic, life isn't always smooth or easy, and challenges are something we all face at different points.
That's a great question to finish on, and it really brings everything together. The key is to start changing the way you see setbacks. Instead of viewing them as failures or signs that something is wrong with you, you begin to see them as opportunities to learn and grow. For example, instead of immediately thinking, I failed, you can pause and ask yourself, what can I learn from this experience? Or what could I do differently next time? That simple shift in perspective might seem small, but it can completely change how you respond to challenges.
It sounds quite simple when you explain it like that, but I imagine that in real life, especially in difficult moments, it takes a bit of practice and patience to actually apply it consistently.
It definitely does take practice, and that's completely normal. Changing the way you think doesn't happen instantly. It's something you build over time. That's why we keep coming back to these ideas again and again. They're simple, but they require consistency. It reminds me of a famous example, Thomas Edison. He once said that he didn't fail 10,000 times while trying to invent the light bulb. Instead, he discovered 10,000 ways that didn't work. That way of thinking is incredibly powerful because it turns failure into progress.
That's such an inspiring way to look at it. He just kept going, learning something from each attempt instead of giving up or seeing it as a final failure. It really shows how mindset can change everything.
Exactly. And that's something we can all apply in our own lives, even in small ways. In a way, life is made up of a series of challenges, both big and small, and each one has something to teach us if we're willing to look for it. The key is to be patient with yourself and not expect instant results. Growth doesn't happen overnight, and that's perfectly okay. Every small step you take still counts as progress, even if it feels slow or insignificant in the moment.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to wrap things up for today. We've covered quite a lot in this episode, from understanding the impact of positive thinking on your mental and physical health to exploring practical tools like gratitude journals, self-talk, and visualization techniques.
We really hope that after listening to this conversation, you're feeling just a little bit more inspired and encouraged to notice the good things in your day today, even if they seem small or ordinary. Remember, it's not about being perfect all the time or forcing yourself to feel positive. It's about taking small, consistent steps in the right direction and building healthier habits over time.
And if you enjoyed this conversation and found it helpful, why not share it with a friend, a family member, or anyone who might need a little boost of positivity in their day? It could make a bigger difference than you think. Thanks so much for spending your time with us here in the Easy English Room. We really do appreciate it.
Stay positive, London. Take care of yourselves, be kind to your minds as well as others, and we'll see you in the next episode.